want to welcome our viewers in Korea and around the globe. I'm Moon Gun-young in Seoul. This is Arirang News special coverage of the 2015 Leaders Summit on Peacekeeping. It's held on the margins of the annual high-level debate of the General Assembly. Now, we're going to dip in and out of the Peacekeeping Summit. This is also a very significant event for Korea, one that shows how far the country's influence has grown on the world stage. Without further ado, let's start to take a look. Now, what we are going to be watching is the United Nations Summit on Peacekeeping Operations. The summit is co-chaired by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and President of the United States of America, Barack Obama.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary General, heads of state and government, distinguished representatives. The word peacekeeping does not appear in the Charter of the United Nations. But for the past 7 decades, our collective ability to maintain international peace and security has often depended on the willingness of courageous UN peacekeepers to put their lives on the line in war-torn countries of the world. Over the years, from El Salvador to Namibia, from Liberia to Timor-Leste, more than 1 million men and women in blue helmets have prevented violence and preserved peace. They have saved lives. They've given societies a chance to rebuild. Through bitter experience in places like Bosnia and Rwanda, we've learned painful lessons and we've worked to do better. Right now, as we speak, more than 100,000 troops and police are deployed around the world, training police in Haiti, promoting stability in Lebanon, protecting civilians in South Sudan. And down the decades, more than 3,300 peacekeepers, as well as many police and civilian staff, have made the ultimate sacrifice. The United Nations and the United States salutes them all. We know that peace operations are not the solution to every problem, but they do remain one of the world's most important tools to address armed conflict. And I called for this summit because UN peacekeeping operations are experiencing unprecedented strains. Old challenges persist. Too few nations bear a disproportionate burden of providing troops which is unsustainable. Atop this, we've seen new challenges: more armed conflicts, more instability driven by terrorism and violent extremism, and more refugees. As a consequence, peacekeepers head into more difficult and deadlier conflicts. They're given ambitious mandates and charged with increasingly dangerous and complex missions. Just yesterday, a UN peacekeeper was killed in Darfur, and we've seen reports today of a tragic incident in the Central African Republic. Put simply, the supply of well-trained, well-equipped peacekeepers can't keep up with the growing demand. So we are here today, together, to strengthen and reform UN peacekeeping because our common security demands it. This is not something that we do for others. This is something that we do collectively because our collective security depends on it. As the largest financial contributor to the UN peacekeeping operations, the United States intends to continue to do its part. And today I'm issuing new presidential guidance, the first in more than 20 years, to expand our support for UN peace operations. Like the nations participating today, we'll pledge additional resources. We'll work to double the number of U.S. military officers serving in peacekeeping operations. We will offer logistical support, including our unrivaled network of air and sea lift. When there's an urgent need and we're uniquely positioned to help, we'll undertake engineering projects like building airfields and base camps for new missions. And we'll step up our efforts to help build the UN's capacity, from identifying state-of-the-art technology to offering training to protection against IEDs. And together, there's much more we need to do together. So let me briefly suggest several key areas where we can focus. First, more nations need to contribute more forces. We are joined today by countries from every region of the world, and I want to thank those who already do so much and commend those who have come here prepared to do more. At this summit, more than 50 countries, from Bangladesh to Colombia, from Finland to China, are making commitments totaling more than 30,000 new troops and police. And they're stepping up with critical contributions like medical units, helicopters, and capabilities to counter IEDs, which will help peacekeepers be able to stay safe and succeed in their missions. This all represents significant progress, and over the coming years, I believe more nations can make even more contributions. Second, we need to improve the protection of civilians. Unlike 20 years ago, today's UN peacekeepers have the clear authority to safeguard the innocent, but it is still applied unevenly. That's why the principles and best practices for civilian protection laid out in Kigali are so important. Because for innocent people, caught in the crossfire in places like South Sudan, the actions of UN peacekeepers can mean the difference between life and death. At the same time, we have to candidly acknowledge that abuse by peacekeepers has to end. I want to be very clear. The overwhelming number of peacekeepers serve with honor and decency in extraordinarily difficult situations. But we have seen some appalling cases of peacekeepers abusing civilians, including rape and sexual assault, and that is totally unacceptable. It's an affront to human decency. It undermines the core mission because it erodes trust with communities. It has a corrosive effect on global confidence in peacekeeping itself. Mr. Secretary General, we commend you for leading on this issue and insisting on accountability. And we know you cannot solve this problem alone. As leaders and as an international community, we have to insist on zero tolerance for abuse. Zero. Third, we need to reform and modernize peace operations because today's complex conflicts demand it, and that means putting in place the highest caliber, merit-based leadership teams for every single mission. It means making sure we get more women leaders into critical roles. It means planning the rules for operations in the field and not in conference rooms. Our goal should be to make every new peace operation more efficient and more effective than the last. Beyond strengthening UN peacekeeping, the United States also supports developing new and deeper partnerships between the UN and the African Union to provide reliable support for AU peace operations. And we look forward to hearing concrete proposals from our African partners to advance this work. Finally, we need to increase our support of the full range of UN diplomatic tools, including mediation, envoys, and special political missions, which help us to prevent conflicts in the first place. We cannot expect peacekeeping operations to succeed unless the parties involved are willing and committed to making peace. If we do all these things, if we provide the support and embrace the reforms that I've described today, I believe we can strengthen peace operations for decades to come, because we know, we can be certain that in the years ahead, as conflicts arise, the call will go out to those men and women in blue helmets to restore calm and to keep the peace and to save lives. And when they go, their success and their lives will depend on whether they have the training and the forces and the capabilities and the global support they need to succeed in their mission. The decisions and the commitments we make today can help ensure that they do. I want to thank all of you for your partnership and the commitments that your nations are making here. We will hear some extraordinary commitments from a number of nations. And we are very proud that the international community has responded to this call in such a significant way. Rest assured that in this critical work, the United States will be a strong partner to all of you. Thank you very much.
The Secretary General of the United Nations.
Your Excellency, President Barack Obama, distinguished co-host, distinguished heads of state and government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank President Obama for his initiative by convening all of us, and I thank you for your participation and leadership. I'm also grateful to Ambassador Samantha Power for her tireless efforts in organizing, preparing this important gathering. I thank the co-chairs, including those who hosted regional meetings that provided critical momentum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are here together to strengthen United Nations peacekeeping in concrete and meaningful ways. Peacekeeping operations save lives, protect people, and help countries overcome conflict. Being a peacekeeper is a noble calling. We must always remember the brave men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice in the name of peace. Today, the demand for peacekeeping has never been greater. More than 120 countries currently contribute over 125,000 troops, police, and civilian personnel. Our mission operates 350 medical clinics, 167 helicopters, 70 aircraft, and 7 ships, and more than 13,000 vehicles. They disarm, demobilize, and reintegrate ex-combatants, strengthen rule of law and security institutions, and promote human rights. These numbers show peacekeeping's value, but are also a sign of troubled times. The situations into which peacekeepers are deployed have never been more challenging as tasks multiply and we face extremist criminal groups and others who show no regard for international humanitarian or human rights law. UN peacekeepers are sheltering 200,000 civilians in South Sudan. United Nations missions have never been designed to accommodate such a large number of refugees. We are monitoring a fragile peace agreement in Mali and working to prevent another outbreak of widespread violence in Central African Republic. In Lebanon, peacekeepers are a source of reassurance as the crisis deepens next door in Syria. Our shared task is to make sure that peacekeeping operations are equal to these and future tasks. Over the past year, we have embarked on an effort to reinvigorate UN peace operations. A high-level independent panel has proposed a set of response. I recently issued my own report setting out how I intend to take the panel's recommendations forward. Such windows for comprehensive reform are rare. This is only the first time in 15 years. It is essential that we act urgently, boldly, and collectively. I would like to highlight four main needs. First, predictable and effective military capabilities, especially critical enablers that have a high degree of readiness and meet UN standards. Second, qualified police personnel, as well as experts in the justice and corrections sectors. We need much more female police officers, and we would most welcome if you send the formed unit, police formed unit. Third, as we fill today's gaps, we need the standby reserve for tomorrow. I urge you to register the specific pledges you make today in our new peacekeeping capability response system, readiness system. Fourth, we must prevent and punish sexual exploitation and abuse. Those who serve in peace operations must never prey on the people they are meant to protect. I count on all troop and police contributing countries to act swiftly and decisively to hold perpetrators to account. Excellencies, beyond concrete capabilities, our operations need solid political backing. We must explore every possible avenue to prevent conflicts before they begin. We must promote the full participation of women in advancing peace and security. And we in the Secretariat must do our part by building on all we have done to streamline our systems and improve the way we support our missions. The presence of so many leaders today and the new pledges you are about to announce represent an unprecedented collective commitment to strengthen UN peacekeeping. You represent long-standing and new contributions as well as all regions of the world. You are reaffirming and indeed reinforcing the truly universal nature of UN peacekeeping operations. I thank you for your leadership. Thank you very much.
Now, we have seen statements by the UN Chief Ban Ki-moon and U.S. President Barack Obama. U.S. President Obama said that the U.S., which contributes less than 100 troops and police, will contribute $2 million for training of African forces for peacekeeping and another $2 million for training on countering impoverished explosive devices, among other support. And now approaching the podium as the next speaker is the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe.
ご列席の皆様、 Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to co-host the second Leaders Summit on Peacekeeping again this year. I'd like to express my deepest respect to U.S. President Barack Obama for his initiative. Since last year's summit, lively discussions have taken place on current and future UN peacekeeping operations or PKO. The high-level independent panel's report on UN peace operations and Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's subsequent report both call for change in order for UN peacekeeping operations to become more effective and truly deliver results. In turn, further deliberations and concrete contributions are expected from the UN and its member states. This past year, in addition to realizing the commitments I expressed here last year, I dedicated myself to preparing a framework for further contributing to the peace and stability of the international community based on a proactive contribution to peace. First, Japan enacted a series of peace and security legislations. Our International Peace Cooperation Act was revised to allow Japanese peace cooperation personnel to adapt to diversifying UNPKOs, thus broadening the range of activities in which Japan could participate. Under this new legal framework, Japan can and will further expand its contributions to UNPKOs. We will also steadily make even more quality contributions to PKOs in the field through engineering activities employing Japan's self-defense forces' advanced technical skills and by dispatching personnel to mission headquarters and UN headquarters. In addition, Japan will zealously explore other possible contributions, such as air, lift support for mission rapid deployment. Second, Japan is expanding cooperation with diverse partners. Last year, we announced support for the UN project for African rapid deployment of engineering capabilities, a pioneering project of the triangular partnership model. To fund it, Japan has contributed approximately $40 million to the UN Secretariat. Engineering unit personnel from East African Troop Contributing Countries, or TCCs, and Japanese Ground Self-Defense Forces are now laboring together in Nairobi, Kenya, conducting a trial training on the operation and maintenance of heavy engineering equipment. We intend to develop this into a full-scale training that is slated to commence next year. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Kenya for hosting this trial training. Japan looks forward to working with many more member states to expand triangular partnership model to other areas besides engineering. Japan supports the U.S.-African Peacekeeping Rapid Response Partnership and seeks to develop coordination even further. Japan will also proactively support those peacekeeping endeavors of new and emerging TCCs from Asia. If Japan is elected a non-permanent member of the Security Council next month, we aim to strengthen the dialogue between the Security Council and TCCs. Third, Japan will further support various training programs to enhance the capacity of peacekeepers. In October, Japan is co-hosting with the UN for the first time in Tokyo a UN Training of Trainers course. Moreover, Japan plans to further foster civilian professionals capable of working in PKOs through upgraded human resource development programs in the peace-building field. Japan will also endeavor to increase the number of its female peacekeepers. Any exploitation of women and children by UN peacekeepers sworn to keeping the peace is absolutely unacceptable. Japan reiterates the importance of a remedial action program for victims of sexual exploitation and abuse and is resolved to provide support through concrete contributions. Finally, the call for change is essential for UN peacekeeping operations to adapt to the changing landscape and deliver results. It is also a challenge that member states contributing to UN peacekeeping operations should address squarely. With this in mind, I promise here that Japan is determined to spare no efforts towards achieving this necessary change. Thank you for your kind attention.
Now, this is the first speech of its kind since the Abe administration made major changes to the country's defense policy. The Japanese Prime Minister said he would provide about $810 million in assistance to refugees and internally displaced people in Syria and Iraq this year. That's about triple the amount from last year. He also announced about $750 million in assistance, including money to pay for water systems in Iraq and other projects to help build peace and fully ensure this peace initiative across the Middle East and Africa. And now let's head back to the Trusteeship Council chamber at the UN headquarters in New York, where the Leaders Summit on Peacekeeping is currently underway.
Republic of China.
El presidente de la República Popular de la China.
尊敬的奥巴马总统，尊敬的潘基文秘书长，尊敬的同事们，我赞赏奥巴马总统倡议召开这次
I
联合
appreciate
峰会。
President Obama's initiative to convene this
和
peacekeeping
平
summit.
是
Peace
人类
is a
共
common
同
aspiration
愿望
and lofty
和
goal
崇高的目
shared by
标。
all mankind.
联合
It
国
was
维
for
和
the
行动
purpose of peace
为和平
that
而生，
UN peacekeeping operations
而
came
生
into being.
成为维
As
护
now
和平
an
与安
important
全
means of
的
upholding
重要
world
途
peace and
径。
security.
维和行动
The
给中
peacekeeping
部地区
operations
带去信心，
bring confidence to the conflict
让当地
areas
民众
and
看到
hope
希望。
to the local people.
当前在
As we
世界
speak,
的很多地方，
People in
中部
many
地区民众
conflict-ridden
依然饱
places
受
around the world
战乱
are
之苦。
still suffering.
对和平的渴
They
望
have
更加
stronger
强烈，
yearning for peace
对联合国的
and higher
期待
hopes
更
for
加
the
殷
United
切，
Nations
对于维和行
and
动的期
greater
盼。
expectations
加凸显。
for the peacekeeping operations.
中国主张
The following is what China
恪
stands
守维
for.
和基本原则。
The basic principles of peacekeeping should be
联
strictly
合国宪
followed.
章
UN
和
Charter
哈马舍尔
and
的原
Hamaska
则
principle
是维和行动
as
的
the
根本指
fundamental
南。
guidelines for peacekeeping
应该继续
operations
坚持。
should continue to be adhered to.
联合国安理
The
会
Security
决议
Council
应该
resolutions
得到
should be
完整的执行。
implemented in their entirety,
任何国家不
allowing
能
no
越
country
权行事。
to act beyond their
维和
mandates.
行动
The peacekeeping
要根
missions
据当地
should
形
be
势和
carried
民
out
意愿，
with the situation on the
及时制
ground
定
and the will of the local
并
peoples
落
in
实
mind.
撤出战略，
Exit strategies need to be timely formulated and executed.
完善维和行动
The
体系。
peacekeeping system needs to be improved.
维和行动
The
既要
peacekeeping
同
operations
预
should
防
be
外交
aligned with
建设
preventive
和平纵向
diplomacy
衔接，
and peace
也要
building
同
in sequence
政治斡
and
旋，
coordinate with political
推进法
mediation,
治、
rule of law,
民族和解、
national reconciliation,
民生改善。
improvement of livelihood at the same time.
联合国安理会
The
要
UN
更
Security
多
Council
听
should
取
be more
当事国
attentive to the
和出兵
opinions
国
of
意见。
parties directly involved and the troop
联
contributing
合国应
countries.
该同
About a better
相关地区
coordinated
组织
peacekeeping partnership should be
建立更协
established
调的
between the United
维和伙伴
Nations
关
and the
系
relevant regional organizations.
提高快速
Rapid
反应水平
response needs to be enhanced.
维和行动
Fast
快速
deployment of peacekeeping operations
能为和
can
平
give
争取
peace
机
more
会
chance
为生命。
and win more time
时间
to save lives.
中国欢迎
China
联合国
welcomes
实施新
UN's
的
establishment
维
of
和
a new
能力
peacekeeping capability
带领机制
readiness system
呼吁会
and
员
calls
国
on member states
积极加
to
入
join the system.
加大对
Greater support
非洲的
and
帮
help
助
should be given to Africa.
维和行动的
Africa
主要需求
has the biggest
在非洲。
peacekeeping needs.
从长远
In the
计
long run,
国际社
the
会
international community
和联合国
and the United Nations
要支持
should
非洲国
support
家
African countries
提高
in
自身
increasing their own
维和维稳
capacity
能
in
力
keeping peace and stability
以非洲
so
方
that
式
African
解
issues
决非洲
can
问
be
题。
addressed in an African way.
各位同事，
Dear colleagues,
中国作为
as a
联合国安
permanent
理会
member of
常
the
任
UN
理事
Security
国
Council,
参加维和
China
行
has
动，
taken part
已经
in peacekeeping operations for
25
25 years.
成为
We are a main
维和行
troop
动
and fund
主要
contributing
出兵国
country to these
和出资
operations.
国，为支持
To
改进
support the
和加
improvement
强
and strengthening
维和
of
行动
UN peacekeeping operations,
我宣布，
I thereby announce
第一，
that, number one,
中国将加入新
China
的
will join the new
联合国
UN
维和能力
peacekeeping
带领
capability
机制
readiness system,
决定为
and has
此
thus decided
率
to
先
take
组
the
建
lead in setting up a permanent peacekeeping police squad and building a peacekeeping standby force of 8,000 troops. Second, China will give favorable consideration to UN requests for more Chinese engineering soldiers and transport and medical staff to take part in UN peacekeeping operations. Third, in the coming 5 years, China will train 2,000 peacekeepers from other countries and carry out 10 demining assistance programs, which will include training and equipment provision. Number 4, in the coming 5 years, China will provide free military aid of $100 million to the African Union to support the building of the African Standby Force and the African capacity for immediate response to crisis. 5, China will send the first peacekeeping helicopter squad to UN peacekeeping operations in Africa. 6, part of the China UN Peace and Development Fund will be used to support UN peacekeeping operations. Dear colleagues, in UN peacekeeping operations, we already have 18 Chinese men and women in uniform have laid down their lives. 5 years ago, we lost He Zhihong, a peacekeeping policewoman in UN peacekeeping mission in Haiti. She left behind her 5-year-old son and elderly parents. She once wrote, "In this vast country, I might be just like a small and light feather. But even so, I would like this feather to carry the wish for peace." This was her wish, and this is also China's commitment to peace. Thank you.
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
And there we see U.S. President Obama shaking hands with the Chinese president. Now, this follows a historic Washington-Beijing summit a few days earlier and also marks the first appearance by Xi Jinping at the United Nations as the president of China. Now, the Chinese leader has made by far the largest commitment. Now, he pledged to establish a permanent 8,000-strong rapid deployment force to respond to crises anywhere in the world, and to provide $100 million to fund a similar force under the African Union. In addition, China would furnish more helicopters and other equipment and provide funding, training, and equipment for 10 mine-clearing operations. Now, such a move could make China one of the largest players in UN peacekeeping efforts.
We should take a moment as we consider today to think about those who've given their lives in UN peacekeeping operations over those last 7 decades. Today, as we meet, there are thousands of people who will be going to work, taking their kids to school, going about their daily lives because of the presence of those blue helmets. And we should think about that as we all agree to enhance the UN peacekeeping operations that are available. Because that's why we're here. The fact is, we need more, we need better, we need greater capabilities, greater capacities. Britain, my country, has long been a believer in UN peacekeeping, long been a funder of UN peacekeeping, and from Cyprus to Bosnia and other parts of the world, we have played our part. We've also played a part as a trainer, training 10,000 peacekeepers in the importance of preventing sexual violence in conflict, something we are committed to doing and continuing with. But we recognize it is time to do more. So today I can announce that we will play a larger part in the AMISOM peacekeeping operation in Somalia, providing as many as 70 troops, including experts in engineering, communications, and capability and capacity building, not least to provide training to other troops. And also at the same time, we will provide between 250 and 300 troops to the UNMISS operation in South Sudan, where the peacekeeping operation is absolutely vital. As Prime Minister, I'm sure that I feel, as many other Prime Ministers and Presidents here today, who make these commitments, they are not without risk, they are not without cost, but they are the right thing to do. Not only are we doing our duty as being a member of the United Nations and playing a part in this vital peacekeeping, but I believe these things are also in our own national interest. When countries break up, we see the problems of migration can affect us all. When countries become havens to terror, we all suffer as a result. Britain is a country that meets its 0.7% share of gross national income in aid payments, so we're able to make these commitments. And as a member of NATO, we spend 2% of our national income on defense and have pledged to continue to do that throughout this decade. So with those capabilities, Britain can play a greater part, and Britain will play a greater part. Thank you.
And approaching the podium for her speech is the President of the Republic of Korea, Park Geun-hye.
The President of the Republic of Korea.
President Obama, Secretary General Ban, Excellencies, let me begin by paying tribute to all those serving as we speak in UN peace missions around the world. They are helping to make our world more peaceful and more secure. Peace operations can indeed make a huge difference. This is something the Republic of Korea knows full well, given our experience from the Korean War. Thus, Korea has been taking active part in a wide range of peace operations led by the UN. Today's peacekeeping summit comes on the 70th anniversary of the UN's founding. It's a valuable occasion for us to renew our commitment to the vision inscribed in the UN Charter, to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security. Fellow leaders, we see today how international conflicts are growing ever more complex, how violent extremism is spreading far and wide. And yet, the UN's capacity to conduct peace operations in responses remains less than adequate. As the June report of the high-level panel points out, UN peace operations need to be holistic in the strategy they pursue. They must prevent conflicts, avoid relapse, and address root causes. It goes without saying that the UN's capacity to plan and deploy peace operations needs to be vastly strengthened. The Republic of Korea will actively support international efforts to enhance UN peace operations. First, Korea intends to deploy an additional engineering unit. They will be assisting construction and humanitarian activities in conflict zones. Korean peacekeepers have long been guided by the belief that genuine peace stems from the minds of people. Hence, their distinctive focus on cementing bonds with local communities, whether in Lebanon, Haiti, South Sudan, or elsewhere. This is an approach that's been widely well received. Second, Korea will strengthen partnerships with regional organizations that have a better grasp of their neighborhood and can furnish rapid responses. Specifically, Korea plans to provide, among others, deployable Level 2 hospital equipment through the African Union to enhance peacekeeping capacity in Africa. Lastly, Korea will steadily scale up its financial contributions to support the UN's conflict prevention and peace-building activities. This would be fitting given Korea's presidency of ECOSOC and its presence in the Peace-Building Commission. Excellencies, conflict and strife may seem endemic to the human condition, but equally unremitting has been our yearning and striving for lasting peace. We must live up to the vision of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war, as enshrined in the UN Charter. To do so, we must rally our collective will to make peace operations stronger and pull together more closely. In 1950, the UN stood united for peace to safeguard the Korean Peninsula. Likewise, Korea will not hesitate to do what it must in the service of UN peace operations. Thank you.
That was President Park Geun-hye of the Republic of Korea addressing the Leaders' Summit on Peacekeeping held on the margins of the general debate of the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, South Korean President Park Geun-hye pledged to dispatch additional military engineers to conflict zones, joining other countries' promises to boost their contribution for missions under growing strain. Now, Korea will also steadily scale up the financial contributions to support the UN's conflict prevention and peace-building initiatives and activities. Now, the size and specifics regarding the countries to which South Korea will dispatch troops was not disclosed by the president during this speech. Currently, roughly 630 South Korean soldiers are stationed in conflict zones in South Sudan and Lebanon. Now, the gathering of world leaders comes at a time when peacekeeping missions are unprecedented in scale of operation and scope of mandates, with 125,000 troops, police and civilian personnel in 16 operations spanning 4 continents. The high-level meeting is aimed at strengthening and modernizing peacekeeping operations, whose nearly 125,000 personnel increasingly face threats from extremist groups while being severely stretched in personnel and equipment, and deployments to crises can take several months. The United Nations, of course, has no standing army, meaning that it's up to the UN's 193 member states to supply people and equipment. At this year's Peacekeeping Summit alone, more than 50 countries have pledged to contribute more than 40,000 new troops and police to serve in some of the world's most volatile areas. That's a surplus of nearly 40% of all uniformed personnel in UN operations today.
But for a very, very good reason. Only hours ago, President Obama stood right here and announced that countries were pledging more than 30,000 troops and police to peacekeeping. This judgment wildly exceeded our expectations of what this summit would produce. But I'm now happy to announce that even that estimate has been outdone because today countries have combined to commit more than 40,000 troops and police to UN peacekeeping. So let's give those countries a round of applause. If implemented, the pledges and commitments made today have the power to transform the enterprise of peacekeeping. Let me provide a quick summary. In addition to the more than 40,000 troops and police, more than 50 countries have pledged more than 40 helicopters, 15 engineering companies, and 10 field hospitals, all assets that are critical to effective peacekeeping. Every region of the world stepped up today, from Africa and Asia redoubling their commitment to Latin America demonstrating its willingness to lead outside its hemisphere, to Europe offering nearly 40 discrete military units that would more than double their number of troops in UN operations. More than just numbers were pledged today. Countries signed on to a summit declaration that calls for far-reaching operational reforms, identifies concrete steps for improving the safety and security of peacekeepers, and commits us each to take serious and sustained action within our own armed forces to root out sexual abuse and punish those responsible. Several countries here today joined others in endorsing the Kigali Principles, which provide a clear blueprint for how peacekeepers can and must protect civilians from the threat of violence. You heard President Obama praise the Kigali Principles, and we urge others to join those who have already signed on. The pledges made today are immensely important. Now, every country must make good on them. When the UN calls on us in a moment of need, whether a gap in an existing mission or a new mission entirely, we must answer that call. Implementation will bring its own challenges, such as integrating new troop-contributing countries into peacekeeping, and those challenges will demand our attention. The UN will need to embrace strategic force generation in earnest, building the forces it needs months and years out from this summit. The follow-up meetings that will be hosted next year by the United Kingdom and the Netherlands will ensure that we continue to build on the momentum of today's meeting and advance these critical efforts. So we have our work cut out for us, but for millions of people who are relying on peacekeepers to protect them from mass atrocities or to ensure that they can access life-saving humanitarian aid or to provide the stability their communities need to rebuild after conflict, we must get this right. They are counting on us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And that is a wrap of the 2015 Leaders Summit on Peacekeeping, held on the sidelines of the general debate of the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I'm Moon Geun-hye. Thank you all for staying with us all throughout this coverage.